too big a word. That's like mayonnaise. I'm sure that's the biggest word I know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. It is conference championship weekend, and we have some very special guests here to help us break it down. Of course, coming from the Rocky Mountain High, fresh off the mountains of Colorado, none other than Peter Jennings. And joining us today, first time on the pod, he is the director of content over at Fantasy Pros, long-suffering Cowboys fan, none other than the Oracle himself, Matt Freedman. Matt, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us here.
Yeah, I'm doing all right, even though the Cowboys lost. I mean, the good thing is I expected them to lose, so it doesn't hurt so much when you're just, you're expecting to get hit like that. But yeah, it's been a good season. We got some relief with the postseason here, so only needing to think about 6 or 4 or 2 games instead of 16 games on a slate. So all that is good. And I even though the divisional round wasn't I think as exciting as the wild card round, I still kind of enjoyed the games of football. We've got 2 great games coming up this weekend.
You're right. It's a very special group that we have here in the Final Four. The conversation on Twitter yesterday after what on earth was that final play call from Mike McCarthy there was, wow, the odds for everybody left in the field is just about dead even here for the Super Bowl. We truly got the 4 best teams here. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting weekend. I think we have the 4 best teams. I certainly think the Buffalo-Cincinnati game was a lot closer. Obviously, that game, the Bengals just absolutely dominated, but I think you had 2 relatively close teams there. And I think, like we've mentioned kind of throughout this pod, Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati, I mean, those 3 teams might be the 3 best teams in the NFL. So, yeah, that was a surprising outcome. And I needed the Cowboys as well from a fantasy perspective, needed a little bit more out of Dak Prescott to get there in some DFS contests. So that was disappointing. But yeah, really fun weekend of football. And it's been a great playoff so far and excited for these conference championships.
And of course, here, before we get into it, because we're going to dive right into those conference championships. There we go. I'm having trouble speaking today. But first, just want to remind everybody that, of course, head on over to unabated.com today. The odds screen is getting pretty thin when it comes to the NFL, but there's still plenty more in basketball. College hoops are in full swing. The NBA is going on. We even have hockey lines. And, of course, baseball's right around the corner here. Check all of that out. And prop season. This is the best time for props right now because with these 2 island games, it means we're going to have a lot more props to choose from. You can use our prop simulators. Maybe head on over to Fantasy Pros and check out their numbers to plug into the simulator because guess what? You can load those in automatically. That's called synergy between companies there. Let's get on into it here, guys. And let's start off here with the 49ers versus the Eagles because, guys, when is the bottom going to fall out on this Brock Purdy-led 49ers team here? I keep feeling like every week I'm saying, okay, is this the week? They're finally playing a better team here. And then it just doesn't seem to happen. Are the Eagles going to be that team that can finally say, hey, wait a second, this is still a 3rd-string quarterback who was the last pick in the draft and is a rookie? Or is Purdy going to a Super Bowl here? Matt, what do you think right now? The Eagles only laying 2.5 at home.
I have adjusted my numbers a little bit based on the market numbers. I think it's always smart to regress a little bit to the market. So I have this now Eagles -1.5, but there was a 3 that popped up at BetMGM, and I did bet San Francisco at +3, and I do like San Francisco, and I gotta say, like Rufus, you guys might have heard of him, Rufus Peabody of the Unabated website.
Roughly familiar.
Yeah, he's obviously super sharp guy, one of the best sports bettors in the world, and the Massey-Peabody power ratings, like that is, I would say, still probably the gold standard when it comes to power ratings out there. And San Francisco, because of their quarterback situation, has been lower in the Massey Peabody power ratings than I think in other power ratings that are out there. And I think it's a situation where I'm probably higher on Purdy than someone like Rufus, where he's, I would say measured in the evaluation of Tom. You said, like a 3rd string, 7th round rookie quarterback. Like that sounds like a recipe for disaster. But I've been kind of the opposite approach of being fairly aggressive in moving the 49ers up the power ratings early on when we saw that Purdy wasn't a stone disaster. I think he's been able to do roughly what they would have wanted a quarterback to be able to do if it were Jimmy Garoppolo, for instance. I don't really see much of a drop off. Purdy isn't. He's not as polished as Garoppolo, and he wins in a slightly different way. He can be more aggressive outside the numbers. He can be more aggressive in the intermediate part of the field. They've had success there with Purdy throwing in the 5 to 15-yard range. I think Garoppolo was a little more nuanced in terms of the shorter passing game and overall mastery. But I don't think this San Francisco offense is really taking much of a step back with Purdy at quarterback, given that we've had, I guess at this point, like 7 games to be able to evaluate him. Like, he's been very functional. At some points, he's looked pretty darn good. And the 49ers, they have the better defense, I think. I would say best defense in the league. I think the 49ers have wide receivers that stack up against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are right there. Kittle, there aren't many tight ends who are better than Dallas Goedert, but Kittle is one of them. Kyle Juszczyk is a totally versatile weapon that they can line up as a tight end, use out of the backfield. Great lead blocker, also good receiver out of the backfield. And then Christian McCaffrey, not totally healthy, but healthy enough. And I think the combination of McCaffrey and Eli Mitchell is just as good as anything that we would see out of the backfield for the Eagles. And yeah, Jalen Hurts, he is better. Like, he is better than Brock Purdy. I don't think there's any denying that. But Purdy with Kyle Shanahan, Purdy's been good enough. And so I think the Eagles should be slight favorites. And if this number gets to 3 across the market, I would be looking to the 49ers.
Peter, what do you think in this game? And what do you think about this Shanahan system? Like, could one of us go in and put up at least 2 touchdowns in this game the way Purdy's playing here? Is he a system quarterback, or is there some talent here that maybe we just everybody missed?
Well, predicting football is certainly challenging. And in general, it's hard to have like super high conviction on these things. The one thing I have high conviction is that no, we cannot go in there and let alone throw 2 touchdowns. I think we'd be drawing pretty slim to survive a series out there as quarterbacks. But back to the game, Freedman, I think, gave excellent analysis. I think the most important factor, though, which has not been discussed yet, is the line of scrimmage. And it's strength on strength. You have the best offensive line in the NFL by far with the Eagles going up against arguably the best defensive line. And that's really, to me, where the game is going to be won and lost is both offensive lines versus both defensive lines. And the strength on strength, Eagles versus 49ers, I'm really curious to see that side of the ball. The Eagles have won against every team when healthy. When Lane Johnson plays, they've just absolutely dominated. They destroyed the Giants that way. On the other side, the Eagles defensive line is really coming around and looking strong, getting healthier. So that's another factor. And we saw that Dallas was able to get pressure and kind of mute the success that the 49ers have had on offense. So that to me is why the game is where it's at. It's basically saying the market's saying, hey, these 2 teams on a neutral field would be really close to a pick 'em, which I think is totally fair. So I think the other factor that we'll have to continue to monitor, that I don't think we're going to gain much throughout the week, but Jalen Hurts said he was nowhere near 100%. They came out and said he had like a Michael Jordan performance given how hurt he was. I don't know how much to believe that. Obviously looked really good against the Giants, but that is another factor is how healthy is Jalen Hurts here. So it should be a great game. Definitely the 2 best teams in the NFC. And I think the most exciting part of this game for me is who wins in the trenches with the Eagles offensive line versus the front of San Francisco.
Who would have thought that the OU Iowa State matchup between Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, where they each chucked like 5, I think Purdy had 5 touchdowns. He had Breece Hall in the backfield and Hurts was throwing a CeeDee Lamb. That game ended up being a preview of this NFC championship here, which is just absolutely wild. But I think that at this point, with the way that the line movement's been in this game, and it's happened in the Bengals Chiefs game as well, which we'll be talking about a little more. Matt mentioned the 49ers went to 3 very briefly. Is there really anything to discern from the line movement within the 3 here? Or is it really just that this is a pick 'em no matter what you're getting it at here?
I think it's, 2.5 is the number, like, pretty steady across the market. And, that's, it's not like a key number in terms of NFL, but sort of like a key number in terms of the market. Like it has moved to 3 at BetMGM, but it hasn't moved to 3 at any other book. And, there will be the opportunity for this line to test 3. It's minus 115, minus 120 odds at a number of books out there. So the juice is already pushing in that direction towards the 3. And I think we will get there at some point. And then it's just a question about, is there resistance? Is there market resistance? Does 49ers money come in at that point? But, I think it's really interesting that we got to 2.5 so quickly. Because I think 1.5 was where we saw this number open last night. We're recording this on Monday, so on Sunday we saw it at 1.5, and pretty quickly moved to 2.5, and it's been sitting at 2.5 and just progressively inching with the juice towards 3. So I think we get there. It's a pretty strong indication that the market is still pushing this in the direction of the Eagles.
Now, how about this other game here, the Bengals versus the Chiefs? Because, I'm not at all surprised to see Eagles 2.5. That number didn't pop off the screen to me when it came up. I think a lot of people were maybe a little bit surprised at the Bengals Chiefs number. The Bengals, 1-point road favorites right now over the Chiefs. Peter, how much of this do you think is the Bengals are the better team, and how much of this do you think is Patrick Mahomes' leg walkable?
It's 100% the Patrick Mahomes stuff. I mean, I think if this game was played and Mahomes was 100%, Chiefs would be -4, -4.5. So, I mean, it's a huge move, and rightfully so. I think Mahomes' superpower, a lot of people just point to the arm, but his superpower is his mobility and extending plays. I mean, he does scramble some, but really his magical plays happen when he extends the play and then makes these, acrobatic, crazy throws downfield that lead to long touchdowns or big plays. And that is, a huge part of the Kansas City offense. And I think that it's not going to be a big part of their offense this week. I mean, a high ankle sprain, what he's dealing with is going to severely limit his mobility regardless. So I think that's where the line is. I think that's why the line is where it is. And I don't really expect much movement outside of just this game kind of staying around a pick 'em for the majority of the week. I do think we could see some sharp Kansas City money come in if it starts to move even a little bit more towards the Bills like it has today. I really expect this line, this game to close around a pick 'em.
Now, how about flipping that the other way, though? Because we talked about it with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, how they said that he was actually playing really hurt against the Giants there and still looked great. This Cincinnati Bengals offensive line is just a straight up mash unit. They were also 2 steps away from giving us a call to go protect Joe Burrow out there last week, and yet turned in an amazing performance versus the Bills, just out physicaled them in every aspect. Yeah, the snow might have been a bit of a factor there, but it's not like that's the be all end all. The fact is that this banged up unit did an amazing job. Do you think they'll be able to replicate that against Kansas City, Matt?
No, I think this is a really intriguing game and intriguing line here. And I agree with Pete that if this were Patrick Mahomes fully healthy, this number for me would be around -5, maybe even starting to get closer to 6. But I think we would see resistance at that point. But I think what we saw last week, I have too many thoughts. I need to try to organize it. Last week, I was of the opinion that the market was too reactionary to the idea that the Bengals offensive line was totally decimated. The Bills would have their way with them. I thought there was value last week in Bengals plus 3.5, which is where the market opened. And the market told me I was wrong. It got all the way to 6. And I mean, sure, it worked out with the Bengals winning that game very handily, but the market was very strong in one direction. And I think because of that, it has kind of whiplashed and reacted too strongly to what it saw out of the Bengals last week. So I think part of what we see here with this line of Bengals favored at some books, Bengals underdogs of only 1 point at some other books, I think what we see in this line is twofold. One, the idea that Patrick Mahomes is 50-50 to play, or that if he does play, he's going to be only, like 50% of himself. And then the other part of this line is an overreaction to the Bengals and what they did last week against the Bills. I still think that even though we didn't see it last week, I still think that the offensive line for the Bengals is a problem. And I think it is more of a problem going against the Chiefs' defensive line than it was going against the Bills' defensive line. Without Von Miller, the Bills' defensive line hasn't been nearly as robust. But the Chiefs, because they can get interior pressure from their defensive line, and because they do have, Karlaftis on one side, Clark on the other side, coming off of the edges, that's a pretty strong defensive line. And I think they will be able to give the Bengals some trouble that we haven't seen or that we didn't see last week with the Bills. So I'm very much on the Chiefs in this spot. Even if we assume that Patrick Mahomes, I think he's like 80% to play versus like 50-50. Even if we assume that Patrick Mahomes plays but is not his normal Patrick Mahomes self, so knock a couple of points off of the normal projection for them, I still think that this should be -3 for the Chiefs. I don't see how you don't bet this number right now unless you just want to wait to see if we get more news on Patrick Mahomes. But I think that there's current value in the market right now with this close to a pick 'em. I have it projected at -3. Although I will say I did not bump the Bengals up all that much from last week to this week with my power ratings based on what we saw. And part of that is because I was already pretty high on the Bengals. I already had them right there in that tier with the Chiefs and the Bills. And I think they very much do belong in that tier, but I still have this as a 3-point advantage going to KC because of the home field advantage. You have Cincinnati, even though they are great on the road, they are playing their second game in a row on the road. So I do think that Kansas City has, has an edge in this spot. But in terms of power ratings, I do have these teams very much neck and neck.
Peter, what do you think of the value there on the Chiefs? Because Matt, I'm inclined to agree with you, especially because of the fact that every report that we're seeing right now, especially from Patrick Mahomes himself, is saying, "Oh, I'm playing in the game." I don't think it's a question of whether he plays. It's just going to be a question of what kind of Patrick Mahomes do we see out there? How hobbled is he? And you're really not going to be able to figure that out in a pregame betting line. That's something that we're just going to have to see. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I think Matt makes a lot of good points. And if you want to back the Chiefs, this is probably as good a time as any, given you can get plus money on them. I don't expect that to be the case. I think Patrick Mahomes will get confirmed in. I think he's 90 to 95% to play in this game, even though there's some reports that he's questionable. I mean, he's going to be deemed questionable all week. I just can't see him not playing in an AFC championship game when there's a confirmed negative MRI. It's just truly a high ankle sprain. Now, the question really comes down to how effective can this offense be with Mahomes losing his mobility? And that's a good question. I mean, I think, Buffalo wants to throw the ball down the field a lot more, and Cincinnati's really good at taking that away. And Cincinnati just really won at the line of scrimmage on Sunday. Kansas City has one of the best offensive lines, maybe the second best behind the Eagles, and I think they'll be able to give him some time, and they like to dink and dunk a bit more. I just worry that their offense is not going to be as effective as it could be, given their really big plays normally happen when Mahomes is scrambling. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how healthy Mahomes can get, but I do agree, if you want to back the Chiefs, this is the time to do it.
One small thing that I think also tilts this a little bit towards the Chiefs is that they do have that one extra day of rest coming from Saturday, playing on Saturday to playing on Sunday. And with the sprained ankle, like that one extra day actually might mean a lot for Mahomes.
Totally. And just in general, rest means a lot. And they're also getting to play at home, which matters. But man, the Bengals team looked really, really good. And we'll see. Clark is going to be a big factor as well. I mean, I thought he'd be able to get even more pressure against Jacksonville. We'll see how the Cincinnati offensive line looks against this Kansas City front.
Now we need some Super Bowl predictions from you gents, though. Who is going to be playing in the final game here? We're up to the penultimate weekend now, unless you count the flag football games of the Pro Bowl, which I am very much looking forward to the prop market on that. But who's going to be in the Super Bowl? What do you think? Matt, we'll go with you first.
I mean, I'll be fairly chalky here and say Kansas City and San Francisco, and I think Kansas City ends up winning in the Super Bowl. And I would say actually right now, I think there's Normally, I would say if you like a team at this stage, just bet the money line and then roll it over and bet the money line again. But I actually think that within the market right now, you can get plus 260, plus 270 on the Chiefs. And I think that is actually better to bet that number right now than just rolling it over, given the situation that we have with the Chiefs. I think if in terms of like their odds on the money line right now, I think if they win this week, you're not going to be able to get like odds that good having combined them in the Super Bowl. So I normally don't think, hey, bet a future now, but I think there actually is value in betting on the Kansas City future at plus 260, plus 270.
I'm still kicking myself for not taking the Bengals 10-1 last week when I thought about it. But Peter, what do you think?
I mean, there's a plus 275 at BetMGM. So make sure you're shopping for the best price. And that does make sense because I agree with Freedman that, my view is that this game will close near pick'em, where most likely if you're betting money lines, especially late, you're going to have to lay a little bit of juice with Kansas City. And then if they win, and then you have the 2 weeks for Mahomes, and assuming they win, Mahomes looks decent, I would expect, regardless of who wins out of San Francisco or Philadelphia, for the Chiefs to be a 3-point, maybe 4-point favorite. So and maybe 4 is a little strong. I would guess that 3-ish range for Kansas City versus either team, assuming no major injuries to any of the teams that make the Super Bowl. So yeah, that plus 275 actually looks pretty good if you're bullish on the Chiefs.
And by the way, if you do just want to take the Chiefs in this week's game right now, plugging into the Unabated calculator here, this Superbook at the Westgate currently has Chiefs plus 1.5 at minus 110, but on the money line, they got them plus 105. And Unabated calculator says take that money line at plus 105. It's the better line there. Hopefully that's still around by the time this podcast episode goes up and you can rush and take that. But either way, I am with you guys. I think that this game, the value right now is on the Chiefs. I think that we're going to see them, especially as reports come out later in the week. You're going to hear, oh, yeah, Mahomes is going to play. He feels fine. That number is going to start drifting back. And I think the Chiefs close this one out as a favorite here. But that is going to do it for us here for the AFC and NFC championship games. Best of luck to everybody. Thank you so much to Matt Freedman for joining us here from Fantasy Pros. Once again, Matt, where can people find you and all the great work you're doing around the internet?
Yeah, you can find my great work and not so great work at the same location, Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. And you can follow me on Twitter at Matt F. the Oracle. And Tom, you mentioned the player projections that we have at Fantasy Pros. I actually just cranked them out earlier before we recorded this pod. So if people are interested in using the Unabated prop tool, you can plug in the numbers from the Fantasy Pros player projections and bet all of those props to your heart's desire. Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros, you can find all the content there.
That's very true. And thank you so much. And of course, you can check out the Betting Pros podcast, which you are the host of. Great show, great listen. I listen to it every week. And as always, guys, follow us at Unabated Sports on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at TV at Work. Find Peter at CSU Ram 88 and Matt at Matt F. the Oracle. That's going to do it for us here. Check out unabated.com. And of course, as always, let's cash some tickets.